Hey, Mama Bears. My name is Michelle Ike. I'm the founder of Mama Bears Arise, and we are here to support moms and grandmas in the fight for freedom for their children. And I'm so glad that you're here today. We have a very special guest. Her name is Daniela. She is the author of Faith Crushed in the Classroom. It's a super important topic as many of us are getting ready to send kiddos off to college and universities and things like that. She's going to share her experience with that and how her faith was challenged when she went away to college. So let's just give the floor to Daniela. If you would, please take a moment and introduce yourself to our Mama Bears.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on. My name is Daniela. I come from an education background. I was actually a teacher in the education system. I worked in the Bronx for a handful of years. I also worked in Brooklyn as well, so inner city teaching. And so some of my background comes from that. You get definitely a melting pot of experiences there. Also part of my background is I'm a prodigal. I, had my experience with growing up in the church and going through a lot of difficulties, having then come back to the Lord going into the second year of my master's degree.
Okay.
And so that's a little bit about myself. Yeah.
Well, that's super encouraging, Daniela, to hear that you were a prodigal, because we know that there are many prophecies about prodigals coming home in this season with the revivals that are happening and more coming. And so we probably have moms and grandmas who are praying and they're on their knees for their kids and grandkids. So it's so encouraging to hear from you today, because that's what we need to know, that this is what God is doing right now. And it's just so exciting. It's a great time to be alive. I know there's so much going on. But we're here for such a time as this, and we're here and we're rising up to fight for our families and fight against all of these evil agendas that are going on. So again, your book is Faith Crushed in the Classroom, and in it you talked about your journey. So let's start with kind of where you were faith-wise as you went off to college. You got the matching dorm things, you decorated and all that. I have 4 children and they all went to college. So I've been through this with them. And where were you with the Lord when you prepared to go away to college?
I was definitely not prepared for what, and it's funny what you mentioned about how you did all this preparation for the physical. And I think so many focus on that. It's like, okay, I personally didn't dorm, but I know a lot of people go through that of let's get prepared, or let's think financially how we're going to do this.
Right.
But one thing that definitely gets, I think sometimes overlooked is the spiritual and emotional state of that 18-year-old going into this new experience where everything that you learned in your high school years gets thrown out the window, and you get almost slapped in the face with this very heavy liberalized curriculum. And if you're not prepared for it, I know when that happened to me, I was not prepared at all. I had a lot of inner healing that needed to happen. I was not in the right place. I didn't know what I wanted to be. And I think that's pretty common. You go and you're like, I don't know what to be. So it's an impressionable time for sure. So that's where I was. I was not sure what I wanted to do. Not really sure about who I was. I knew that I wanted to actually change some things I was known for in high school and be known for other things in college. So definitely not clear on my identity at that time at all.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I think it's a big transition time, right? Because you're going out on your own, you're out of your parents' nest, you have that freedom to do what you want. And it's just an environment of, I'm just going to say the word indoctrination. If you want to take over a country, you take over its education mountain. And I think that we're finally waking up to that, whether it be in the elementary school. I know you said that you had a teaching background, so do I. And I love being a teacher. I taught middle school.
I did as well.
In the heyday of the 90s, when it was still fun and we weren't worried about what bathroom, and there was no transgender discussion at all. It was starting to be a little bit about the LGBTQ, reading literature about that and everything. But anyway, I think that we can safely say that our education system has been infiltrated, and, it's about evolution. It's about sexuality. It's about all religions, all paths. If there is talk of religion, it's anti-Christian. And I think what we're also seeing today, Daniela, is training people or educating people to hate our nation. That's something new that we've seen in the last few years. And it's like cool to hate America. It's cool to burn the flag. It's cool to disrespect our country. And, it's like, if it's so bad, why are you still here? That's my question for people. But let's talk a little bit about, okay, so you get to college and you said that you weren't ready. What were some of the things that you faced? You wrote about different things that professors said and different movements, different agendas. Talk a little bit about the first experiences that you had that really came against your Christian faith.
Yeah, so they would bring speakers in, and when I was going to college, there wasn't, and you're watching this now, I graduated, I went in about 10 years ago.
Okay.
So it's only been about 10 years. It's not a significant amount of time in terms of curriculum change, but we've seen a lot of new things.
Oh, yes.
So one of those early things was, before you saw in mainstream media the transgenderism, they brought in a transgender firefighter. I remember that experience.
Wow.
And I was like, what is I didn't even know what transgender was. It wasn't even something, it was kind of like this fringe thing that we really didn't know about. That was one of they would bring in guest speakers, and we would have to go depending on our classes. So that was one. Another speaker they brought in was a professed Marxist, and he's straight up said he hates police. And it was very controversial, but it was actually causing a lot of dissent within the actual meeting that we were having, and a lot of people felt uncomfortable. But it wasn't only just these speakers that were being brought in, it was also just in the classroom. So the professors, there's supposed to be this idea of not being biased, essentially, and kind of you're looking outside looking in kind of thing. This could be, make your own decision, but that's not the case anymore. That's not the case in terms of education as an educator. When you would go for professional development, they tell you that taking a role like that is actually passive and that makes you racist. There were all kinds of experiences like that, but those were some of the early ones. And if you had any questions or opinions, it was really shut down very quickly. So those are a couple early experiences.
Interesting. Well, when you mentioned that, I listened to a man who's just a very wise person. He is a Christian, and he talked about being in the universities 20, 30 years ago. And he said these were places where you could have conversations, you could have debates.
Yes.
You could have a different opinion, and that is a very healthy atmosphere. I love to have intelligent conversations with people who have different opinions than I do. But Absolutely. What we've entered into is this cancel culture, and you alluded to that just a moment ago. It's like, if you have a different opinion about these things, you're labeled racist, you're labeled homophobic, transphobic, something phobic. You have hate speech, right? You have hate speech if you're simply telling the truth or bringing in a Christian or conservative perspective on things. And how sad is that our colleges and universities have just become these places where the only opinion that is validated and allowed is the one that is saying all of this nonsense, right? This liberal agenda, this woke agenda. And it's just really sad. We've lost the ability to have healthy debates, to have different opinions. It's just like you're thrown, a label is thrown on you and you're shut down.
Absolutely.
It's tragic.
Absolutely. That is very true. And I think when you have students who are going in who, as I was unclear on my identity, had a really great need for acceptance, that's shoved in our faces growing up
Yes.
with the
Mhm.
media, and you need to look a certain way or sound a certain way. And so
Mhm.
the enemy sets up this counterfeit to your identity. And it's very interesting because by the end of my senior year, I would debate you tooth and nail, but for the liberal side. And it's like, how in 4 years,
Yeah.
to go from questioning your faith, going in, having these experiences, but
Mhm.
not wanting to feel like the outcast, not wanting people to label you in that way. And so you slowly shut down your voice more and more because at the core
Mhm.
of it, you don't even fully know if you believe it. You don't even fully know if God is
Right.
real, or those are the questions that you wrestle with. So you're like, well, if everyone else is going this way, it must be valid. I must be the wrong one. And so
Yes.
that was part of my experience, was because I wasn't firm in it. I was offered this idea of the, like, what I, the coexist movement, where it
Right.
sounds great. It's, let's be in tolerance of one another, where, I mean, if you look at how all the religions and ideologies, how they stack up, they're actually not tolerant of each other. They're not
Right.
designed to be. They can't be.
Right.
um you can be, of course, respectable of a person that's made in
Mhm.
God's image, but the ideas are going to clash
Right.
regardless. So you're kind of trained up in this way of, we have to tolerate, we have to accept everyone except for, those who believe this way, because this way is about, proselytizing people, or trying to change them, and you can't change them. And again, because it's their identity. When it's
Right.
rooted in your identity, you're not just arguing of, hey, I think this is wrong.
Mhm.
It's set up where you're telling someone, or they believe you're telling them, that's not who you are. And it's always a question of, who am I? So that's a big
Right.
piece of it.
That's huge. Well, those key words, tolerance and coexist, right? Most of us have seen that coexist bumper sticker on the back of the car. And I saw one that said they can't all be right, and so when they conflict each other, then there's a problem. And what I have seen happening in the education system, whether it be at the secondary level, or the elementary, or collegiate, it's this idea that we need to be accepting of all religions except for Christianity. So it's like, and then they throw up the separation of church and state, which is a bold-faced lie, and I'm not going to get into that today.
Right.
Our country was obviously founded by Christians who wanted religious freedom.
Designed to protect them.
Yeah,
And not
exactly,
the state.
exactly.
Yes, I know.
So, nobody would ever tell a Muslim, you have to do this, or you have to accept that, or a Hindu, or whatever, but a Christian, you have to accept our way of thinking. You have to bake the cake, you have to do this. And it's just that is so prevalent in the colleges and universities today. So in the book, you wrote about these agendas. You alluded to the LGBTQ, and even though you went to school 10 years ago, like you said, that doesn't seem like a very long time, but wow, things have really changed just in the last few years. I mean, in a lot of areas, it seems like since 2020, since COVID, there's just been a lot of shifts. And the latest one is, the trans movement. And I was listening to an interview with a woman who she was an athlete, and she was standing up against allowing a male to compete against.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, 5 years ago, if you would have said, hey, we're going to allow a man to compete against women, feminist groups, women's rights groups would have been up in arms saying, this is so unfair, this is so wrong.
Right.
Men shouldn't be competing against women. But now that we've labeled her a woman, and we're saying that it's healthcare and all of the other little flowery words we use. But anyway, she said that when a girl on the team would, excuse me, question this, which obviously you would, because you're not going to win any races against a man.
Right.
They would go to the university and voice their concern. And by the time they walked out, they were like, oh, I think this is so great. They were just brainwashed.
Right.
And here we have our universities, which we've held in high esteem. Many of these were actually founded by Christians to further the gospel, and they've definitely turned from that. But I'm just sitting there thinking, this is higher education. And they are trying to tell people, oh, it's perfectly normal, it's perfectly fine, because even though this man was born as a male, she is now female, even though her genitalia is male, and now it's perfectly fine. And these are the people with the tassels and the PhDs and the MS and all of that. And we think that they're just so smart, but the Bible says that God confounds the foolishness, confounds the wise. He will use the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. So the earthly wisdom is on parade of its stupidity right now, really, because it's so utterly ridiculous. But again, you cannot say anything against it. You can't speak out against it, or you're going to be canceled. You're going to be labeled. And it's absolutely sickening. It just how far we've come. And I know, it's like, you cannot say biological male. I've heard of people, on a paper or on a test. Well, your paper was really great, but you used the words biological male, so I failed you. What?
Right. Yeah.
It's just the craziness. Anyway, go ahead and share what you feel led to share on that.
Yeah. I think all of this, so there's two parts to this. The first part is always going back to recognizing that the people who are, let's say, dealing with that, because in my opinion, someone who identifies as transgender or something like that, they're hurting very badly internally.
Absolutely.
And they need to know who they are, and the only way to discover who you are is through Christ.
Amen.
We don't know our identity until we come to have a revelation of the living God and him as our creator.
Yeah.
But the enemy comes and he tells you who you are according to your feelings. And we live in a world, and we see it in our media. It's part of that indoctrination that starts when you're little, which is to go according to how you feel. And so much of faith doesn't rely on our feelings. Our feelings are not good indicators of truth.
Yes.
But we live in a society that it's, oh, well, this is how I feel today, so I'm going to act on that decision.
Yeah.
And then, it's pure madness that, we have adults and government officials, and, we're talking entire countries that are condoning this behavior based on a feeling. My biggest issue is with educators, teachers who went and got a degree, and you learn psychology when you take classes. You learn about the frontal lobes and the development, and how, that's not till 21 and 25 years old that's fully developed. So why do we have something that says, hey, we can make this major life change when that their brain development is not even there yet? So to me, that's the madness. But at the end of the day, we remember that it's the spiritual that is influencing the physical here. And the enemy is, wroth with wanting to break up families. If he can break up those families, he's going to get to the children. And when he can get to the children, he can influence their identity and influence their destiny. And so I think God is really on a move to stop a lot of that. I've seen, even these revivals we see happening, things happening on college campuses. I'm actually hopeful for this generation in a way as well, because, and I know for myself, I was searching for truth. That's all I wanted. I wanted to know the truth, because there's this deep thing I think God places within us that searches out the truth. Yeah. And so if you keep searching and you search long and you search hard enough and you don't give up in the search, you're going to find Jesus, because Amen. Jesus is the truth.
Yes,
so I went, and you said about coexist, I went to the farthest deep end. I have it tattooed on me. Okay. Wow. Like, that's how far I went. And I remember when I first came back to the Lord, I'm like, Lord, should I go get this removed? And he told me no. He said, because people wouldn't even believe you that you came from there. He goes, I want you to have it as a testimony of what I've done in your life. And so I can empathize with students where they are in their questioning, in their wanting to discover, and in their pushback on religious systems, because religion has not done a good job of really molding and helping to disciple. That's what it should be about, is discipling our
Right.
young people. There's a lot of things I know that growing up were compromised in my life. It was, hey, get your kid to church. Don't take them to baseball practice. Don't get them to church. Get
Yeah.
them in good Bible believing church. Invest if they have youth events. And that doesn't mean it's going to solve the whole problem, but keep
Right.
them busy around the things of the Lord. And even if you're like, hey, I don't see the fruit, you're going to see that seeds are planted. You're going to see it because those seeds were planted in me. So even when I had gone away, there was always this like thing that said, this isn't quite right. And even in what you see on the outside, the midst of my pain and frustration and anger and all those things that were boiling inside of me, it was a reflection on the outside. I mean, I had piercings everywhere. This is not to say like if but that was me. I had piercings everywhere. I had different color hair. I was trying to find myself, trying to figure out who I was. And then the education system comes and tries to tell you who you are, and it tells you who you're not, because it sets up, it's deeply ingrained within the curriculum, from history classes to science, all of it. I mean, people don't think that it goes that deep, but it does, because there's secular humanism, and that's the religion that's taught. It's secular humanism, and it's in everything. It's in the literature, and these little nuances of ideas, they build on each other from kindergarten all the way through, if you go to college, through the end of college. And then eventually you come out and you're like, well, why do I believe these certain things? It's because it was reinforced to you over and over and over again at different levels, but not outwardly in your face. Now it's in your face, but then
Yeah.
it really wasn't. So, recognizing, and this is something that the book covers, is it covers the different subjects that they're going to encounter at the middle and high school level. So literature, it talks about specific works that are very geared towards this ideology. But at the end of the day, if you understand and can equip yourself about what is secular humanism, what does it believe, what are the ideas, what are the tenets, you're going to start to see it when kids come home with homework. You're going to
Right.
see it in what they're reading, but it's going to take that extra step of being involved, opening up there, seeing what is on the syllabus, and being vocal and say, hey, I'm not comfortable with my child reading that book. I'm not
Right.
comfortable with this specific thing. But if for example, because as you know, there's state assessments. So if you know that there's certain things, like let's say in the way that science is taught, for your children, they're going to have certain questions as to why those things are incorrect. And if you don't have an answer for them, the school's going to win out. So
Right.
this is going to take you equipping yourself in the faith,
Mm-hmm.
doing the extra research, praying, asking God to lead you, and to know, you need to know how to answer your children when they have questions. Because if you don't, the internet will. And the internet, if the algorithm is not set up in the favor of Christians, you're going to find everything that's not the right answer, right?
Right.
So I say that that's a very important piece, is being aware, of your child's emotional state, where they are in their identity, having a good relationship with them so they can freely come to you,
Yeah.
involving them as much as you can in their community, explaining these social issues,
Mm-hmm.
and not just chalking it up to, well, they're it's wrong, because they're going to say, well, why is it wrong? And
Right.
if you don't have the biblical backing and understanding of it, and you can't help them navigate what they're believing, that's going to be the struggle. That's where you're going to lose them, because the school system will answer it where you're not able to.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. That's
so
really
that's part
good.
of the book. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Of
I love that. I love, like I said, we spoke before, and I don't want this to just be negative. I want to give
course.
action, because mama bears are about taking action, not just sitting around and lamenting about how bad things are. And I know there's a huge movement to homeschool. There are mamas who are putting their kids in Christian schools, and gone are the days where you just send little Johnny off to school and trust the school to teach him what he needs to know. All right.
Right.
I think our eyes were open during COVID, when a lot of people were doing education online, and then it's like, well, parents, you can't see what we're teaching. It's like, wait a minute, no, we can. And so we really need to be aware. And not everybody can homeschool. It's not for everybody, but there are more and more options out there. And if you knew how bad it was. I mean, I'm not a full-time teacher anymore, but I have done some subbing. I see what's going on. And what's interesting, and part of the indoctrination is painting Christians in a negative light.
Absolutely.
If you have a book, there might be a Christian character in it, but guarantee that Christian character is going to be super religious, not loving.
Yep.
That's part of it too. And I think that what you said about religion is so true, in that Christianity is not a religion. Yeah, technically it's a world religion, but Christianity is about a relationship with Jesus. And when we know him, not just know about him, if you just know about him, then you are going to fall prey to a lot of this indoctrination that we've been talking about. But if you actually know him as an experience, you've experienced him, like it'd be like somebody trying to tell me my husband isn't real. I know him in an intimate way, and you're not going to tell me he isn't real. Okay. I know Jesus in an intimate way. I've experienced his love. I've experienced his presence. Okay. So I am at a place where, I'm okay being the only one. I'm okay being the only one because I know that God and I make a majority. But when I was younger, I was very much influenced. And I think it's what you said. You don't know who you really are. The enemy is always after our identity. So let's talk a little bit about a time. Can you think of a time where you did maybe stand up for your faith and how that went? And, did that go well or not?
Yes. So, well, there's a couple instances I can think of right away. And when I first started, I was not exposed. I didn't know really much about critical race theory. I didn't know what that was. Come from a background of Italians and from Brooklyn, and I had a sociology class, and apparently that already made me a racist that I didn't know. It was unbeknownst to me. So we were having a conversation one time, and there was this other thing that had come up about race specifically, and it was very it was an interesting conversation, because it was almost, because I presented, right? It's all about presentation, identity, outward, how people identify you, right? So because I present a certain way, they don't know my background in terms of race or anything like that. And it's all about how people perceive you. But I had just a thought about how it's not. I didn't believe it was an issue, a race issue. I did believe that there were cultural things that created a distrust. And again, a lot of this coming from, my father, he works in New York for housing authority. And so he has been in situations, and there's certain things that he's witnessed. And so there was instantly a fear at times of certain situations, and it had nothing to do with race. It was everything to do with the environment that of these things that were being witnessed. And so coming from that understanding and coming from that background, there had been something in the news that came up. And then so this issue came up about, well, is this, is it? And I said, well, I don't think that this is a race issue. I believe that this is more of, there's a cultural thing that's happening here. And even that statement is labeled as racist. And I saw that actually permeate into my career as a teacher, because we had a professional development, and a similar thing came up where I had mentioned about, hey, we're one human race. And I think that the concept of race as a whole, they say, is like everything's a social construct, right? It's how society constructs. I said, but we're all human. We all bleed. We're all made up of a skeletal system, a nervous system. Like, we all are human beings. And there's variations within our, right? Some have different kinds of hair, colors, eyes, tone, melanin. All of those things are just variations of the same race. And that was a racist statement. So, and that's pure biology. So it's very interesting, because it comes to this place of a lot of it having to do with redefining definitions. So I'm an English person. My background is in literature, history, sociology. So redefining what it means to be racist, which sets up an idea that if you are white, you're racist. You cannot be racist and be anything other than white. And so that's one example.
Yeah.
There's other examples, as well, that it's just, if you're not accepting of a certain, or the other way, if you are accepting of a certain lifestyle, meaning you think it's fine, you want to be a stay-at-home mom, that's something that you want to do. They look at you like there's something wrong with you.
Wow.
And you're never presented on the other side. My desire, I always wanted to be a mom. That was one thing that I always knew that I wanted. I always said I wanted to have babies young. I wanted to get married young. I don't know. It was just a thing that I had. I was like, I want my first baby by 23. Like, I just want to be right out of college, get married. That was my desire. By the end of my college years, I didn't want kids. I didn't want to be married. I wanted to be a just top level CEO. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. I own a business. I'm the CEO of a business, but I'm also a stay-at-home mom. And I'm also, have 2 little babies that I understand that if I'm not present, they're going to have issues bonding. They're going to have issues with relationship. The role that I play as a mom is very important. The role that I play as a wife is very important. And the way that society has brought us up to believe, hey, if you're a female, you have to be like a male. And that idea has now been manipulated to becoming male, right? Or becoming a female. So you see this imbalance, right? And even in the spiritual sense, it's the whole Jezebel Ahab situation is what's happening. And more and more of that, it's this transference, this, you were born this way, but actually you weren't, because Sigmund Freud said that your identity comes from your sexuality. And it's like, he was a perv who was talking about experiments on infants, and but you don't learn those things. So why are these people celebrated? It takes a simple Google search. I mean, Google's doing its own thing too with some truth way down in the search, or not present at all. But really, most things you can still find online. Go to Google. Hey, Sigmund Freud, read about him, read his bio, read the people you're learning about, because you're only going to be presented one way. I had a situation, I remember, in a philosophy class, and it was about how the Greeks had this age of reason, and they were trying to, spread that age of reason. And they showed the Christians as being these people who came in, they burnt up all of the scrolls, they did all of these things, but they weren't talking about the fellatio that was happening on little children and the Socrates-like teachers. They didn't talk about those things, right? They didn't talk about how Christians were not coming in and burning up everything and actually, in fact, that Christians lived in those communities and they were being attacked. So it's such a switch. The narrative is so manipulated to push apart a certain agenda. See, people look at it like this. They say, here's the past, here's history, here's what happened, here's where we are now. What you need to realize is that it's already been written. And Jesus tells us that this is how it's going to go. This is where it's going to go. And this is how it's going to end. I need you to have the end in mind and look at where we are looking back, because God exists outside of time and space, right? He's not subject to our timeline, he's not subject to those things, although he impacts within it. So understanding where we are as a society now is progressing towards a certain outcome that the enemy has plotted from also the beginning of his fall. And so when you look at things from that perspective, A, you'll be a lot less surprised at what you're seeing, but B, you're going to be far more equipped in how to answer and how to handle, and these won't become things that are surprising to you, but then in fact, you'll feel more empowered and equipped to then educate our future generations.
That's so good. Well, I'd like to back up a little bit. You talked about CRT, critical race theory, and this is something that we addressed at Mama Bears Arise with Keisha King. She is a beautiful Black woman who was a Trump supporter, and she took a lot of backlash from her family and friends for supporting Trump because, Trump is so racist and all of this. And I did interview her, and I can share that interview on the Mama Bears page because it's so powerful. But one of the things we talked about is you don't fight racism with racism, right? So if you're white, you're racist.
Right.
Blanket statement. Okay. You're inherently racist if you're white. Okay. So what if I make a statement, you're inherently blank if you're Black. That would get me, a cancel culture, and I'd be labeled, all of these things, even though I have family members who are Black and I love them dearly.
Yeah.
So now attacking white people is just as racist as making general statements about Black people. And, there was a certain president who was Black, part Black, and I did not agree with his policies. Now, when I said that, and if I would say, I don't agree with his stance on being pro-choice, okay, I don't agree with his stance. If I disagreed with anything he did, boom, I'm a racist because I'm attacking him because he's Black. No, I'm not attacking him because he's Black. I don't care what color he is. I don't agree with his policies. Right. But we can't have those conversations anymore because everything is just, it furthers the point that Michelle is white and therefore she's racist. And it's just, we have just gone backwards in that area. But here's the thing, when you recognize the enemy's agenda to divide people based on the color of their skin, based on whatever, instead of celebrating the differences, you talked about we're one race. Yes, we're different. Praise God, we're different. It'd be super boring if we all looked the same.
Right.
But, it's just the enemy has been trying to divide people. And that's what he's doing with just a lot of different, and that's how he gets in there. All right, we're running out of time, Daniela, but let's talk about how you came back to faith. You said you were a prodigal. You said that you really went far with the coexist thing and everything. How did you start coming back to the Lord?
Well, I have to give all credit to the Lord on that one, because he just started to slowly draw me back. My mom was actively praying for me. She's actually one of the first people I called that when because I actually had an experience, an encounter with the Lord. I received the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and I was like cleansed of just all kinds of things. Because actually prior to that, I was starting to get into some witchcraft. That's the other thing. Witchcraft is very heavily exalted. But that's based on powerlessness, when people feel powerless. And that's what this is all about. So what you see in a lot of the rebellion and a lot of what's building up, in the hearts of young people that are very much fight you tooth and nail, right, for this ideology, it's backed by the spirit of witchcraft. And that's very, very heavy right now through rebellion, right? Because when we're rebellious. So the Lord has started to draw me back to himself. Little by little, I kept searching. I would say, I'm an agnostic atheist, but then I would have questions, and it always came back to questions. Questions are powerful. Yeah. The enemy used a question to steer, right? To steer Adam away from the Lord. However, questions also bring you back. It's one of the number one things that Jesus did, that he used when he taught with parables. He asked questions. Yeah. So if you are asking the right questions, the Lord will send people. He'll send, and you as a parent, that those are listening, you can be that person that's planting those seeds. My dad is not like, this person he has every answer about faith, but he asked me one question, and that one question was enough for the Lord to use it, that I said, there's too many holes in what I believe right now. It can't be the truth. And I started searching again. So I just kept searching. I was asking questions. I was searching. And eventually I found Jesus. He never lost me. I lost him. I guess I, went my own way, but right. He had drawn me back to himself. I had that experience, that kind of radical change in my life. And then he started to teach me the truth. He started to impart truth to me. And that's, there's a lot of things that happened from that day until now. But that's pretty much the core of it. And, I know not everybody is going to have a radical experience like I had, but there are things that you can do along the process, which is to maintain the relationship with your children, being flexible and open. Let there not be fear. If they have a question, even if they're questioning their own sexuality, have a talk with them. Don't set up this thing where they have a fear to come to you, because then they're going to go to the internet, then they're going to find Pinterest and Twitter, and they're going to find a community that's going to validate and support them in the wrong way.
Yeah.
Recognize that, yes, you are a parent. Yes, that might mean that they may not like you sometimes, right? That's normal.
Yeah,
it's okay.
true, unfortunately.
But as long as you're maintaining a relationship that is, hey, they can trust you, that trust is so important, to come to you with questions, that even if you don't have the answer, say, you know what, let's search it out together. Let's pray about it together. Develop that and model that for them, and be their safe space. Because if you're not their safe space, the school has a safe space, and it's not going to lead them to their identity. So that was important for me, having a place to go to ask questions. And also on the spiritual side, just keep praying and asking God for strategy. I always say, ask the Lord for strategy. He's the best strategist that there is. But also just trusting him. Sometimes they have to go through their process. I had to go through what I went through. I believe that, in order to expose it. You can't expose it or help free others in it if you haven't been through it yourself. So just trust. So yeah, I think that was the biggest thing for me.
That's good. That's good. So what I heard was you had a praying mama. Okay, praying mama. And those seeds of faith had been planted early on in your life, and they came back and bore fruit later, right? And that is just so beautiful. I absolutely love that, because, you know, I'm a praying mama and a praying nana, and that's huge, to stand on God's promises. And like you said, to maintain that relationship. Unfortunately, we have situations where, you know, you have different political views, so you're not coming to Thanksgiving, or, you know, your hair is purple and we don't want anything, you know, whatever, you know, and we just need to continue to love our kids, speak truth. And I love what you said about asking questions, just simple asking questions, and not just bashing people. Just leaves the door open for conversation. And like I said, maintaining that relationship. But I'm thinking about those parents who have scrimped and saved and put money in that college fund for years. And, you know, they're getting ready to send their precious children away to college. I really recommend everybody get Daniela's book, Faith Crushed in the Classroom, because it is just filled with so much wisdom. And the things that you went through, even though it was difficult for you, Daniela, and it was probably difficult for your parents to watch that, God wastes nothing. And so now you really have that perspective. You have that ability now to speak into it. You see how it happens, and you see the path back to Jesus. It's so important. So if you would close us out with just speaking to those parents who are getting ready to send their kids off to college or university, what wisdom do you have to share with them?
Yeah. Stay in conversation, just stay in communication as much as possible. If, you know, they haven't left you quite yet, have just a really vulnerable and talk with them. Just sit down before they go, you know, and if there's anything that, you know, has maybe built up over the years, if there needs to be healing or forgiveness that needs to happen, do that beforehand, so that you become that safe space through those years. So even if they're, you know, going off and they're not staying home, but they're going to be dorming, you know, knowing that they can call you if something happens, and you have that relationship, or if something comes up in their school curriculum and that they're asking questions, just say, hey, you know what, I want you to know, if you're questioning something or you want to know, I'm a safe space. Just come talk to me. You know, we'll study it out together. But you know, the work that you've done up until this point, you've done. And so now at this point, it's just trusting that those seeds that you planted will bear fruit, but maintaining and keeping open that conversation, that relationship, clearing anything that may have built up over the years that the enemy can use as an entry point or a point of lying to your children. I think is going to be the most important thing, because God has placed you as their parent for a reason.
Right.
And so that, and it all comes from relationship.
That's good. And I would add to that, maybe encouraging your son or daughter to connect with other believers on campus. Most campuses have a Christian organization, and it's really important to be with people that have the same interests as you. You know, we all need that connection. We all need that community. And so I would encourage you to find that crew, different organizations, in order to stay connected, and just to have a source, a person to pray with, a person to fellowship with is incredibly important. Well, Daniela, thank you so much. I know you have littles. I know you're a businesswoman. You're the CEO of your own company. You're doing great things for the kingdom. You're a mama bear standing up for your kiddos. And you're also a very beautiful voice, a voice of reason, a voice for God in a crazy world. So I just pray blessings over you and your family. And I pray that this book would go far and wide. And I will share the links to everything that you're doing so that moms and dads can get that book, because it's so insightful. So God bless you. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Mama Bears. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and share this out, because there are so many people getting ready to send their kiddos away to school right now. And Danielle's perspective is so critical as we continue to stand for faith and freedom and fight for our kiddos. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.